I was standing in a lawyer's office in downtown Calgary, holding a pen I couldn't make myself use, when my mother-in-law walked through the door uninvited and said something that stopped time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Lynette. I'm 34 years old, and 14 months ago, I was the kind of woman who believed that if you worked hard enough at a marriage, it would hold. I believed that. Completely. The way you believe in things you've never had reason to question. My husband and I had been together for 9 years, married for 6. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming in Kensington, back when we were both renting overpriced apartments and pretending that was fine. He was funny in a quiet way. The kind of funny where you don't realize you've laughed until after. His name is Warren, and for most of those 9 years, I would have told anyone who asked that Warren was the most honest person I had ever known. That's the part that made everything so much harder. We built something real together. A house in a suburb just outside the city, close enough to commute but far enough that you could hear birds in the morning. We had a dog named Biscuit, a half-renovated basement, and a plan. We were going to start a family. We'd talked about it more times than I could count. We had names picked out. We'd argued, gently, about school districts. Then, around 18 months ago, everything shifted. It wasn't one moment. That's the thing people don't tell you about marriages falling apart. There's no dramatic scene where someone slams a door and that's the end. It's quieter than that. It's a Tuesday evening where conversation feels slightly off. It's a weekend where he seems somewhere else entirely, even when he's sitting right next to you. It's a question you ask and an answer that doesn't quite fit, but you can't explain why. I noticed in November, the year had been hard. We'd both been working too much, and I'd told myself that explained things. But by December, I couldn't tell myself that anymore. Warren had stopped mentioning the future. Not dramatically. Just stopped. The house we were planning to repaint. The trip we'd talked about taking to Nova Scotia. The baby conversation. It didn't stop with a fight. It just quietly disappeared, the way something can vanish from a room without you ever seeing it leave. I asked him what was wrong so many times that the question started to feel embarrassing. Every time, nothing, Lynette. I'm just tired. By February, I had started to wonder if I was losing my mind. Because nothing had obviously changed, and yet everything felt different. I checked myself. I tried to be more present, more patient. I suggested we go to couples counseling. He agreed, came to 2 sessions, and then stopped showing up without explaining why. And then, on a Thursday night in early March, he came home from work and set a folder on the kitchen table. "We need to talk," he said. Inside the folder were separation papers. I remember staring at them for a long time before I said anything. The kitchen light was buzzing slightly. This small, annoying buzz I'd been meaning to get fixed for months. It felt very loud right then. "Warren," I finally said. "What is this?" He wouldn't look at me directly. He looked slightly to the left of my face, the way people do when they've rehearsed something and they're concentrating on getting through it. "I think it's better if we separate," he said. "I'm sorry." That was it. That was the explanation. "I'm sorry." I asked him if there was someone else. He said no immediately. Too immediately, in the way that made me take note of the speed rather than the answer. I asked what had changed. He said nothing had changed. I asked what I had done wrong. He said I hadn't done anything wrong. I asked, then, why he was doing this, and he said he just thought it was better this way. Better. He kept using that word. Better for who? Better how? When I pressed, he became quiet in a way that felt like a wall being built rather than a person withdrawing. I didn't sign anything that night. I told him I needed time. He nodded and went to sleep in the guest room, and I sat at the kitchen table until 2 in the morning with a cold cup of tea and absolutely no explanation for any of it. The weeks that followed were the loneliest I've ever experienced. I went to work. I'm a physiotherapist. I work with people in pain every day, and I'm usually quite good at setting my own aside. But it was hard. My friends knew something was wrong. My mother knew. But I couldn't explain it to anyone because I didn't understand it myself. I hired my own lawyer. Her name was Ms. Whitfield, and she had the calm, steady energy of someone who had sat across from devastated people for decades and learned to be a steady presence in the middle of chaos. I liked her immediately. She told me I didn't have to sign anything quickly. She told me to take time, gather my thoughts, understand what I wanted. What I wanted was an explanation. That was all I wanted. Not the marriage, not the house, not even necessarily for him to change his mind. I just wanted to understand why my husband of 6 years had looked at me one day and decided I wasn't worth a real conversation. I never got that from him. What I got instead was a phone call from his sister. Her name is Jolene, and I want to be honest. We had never been close. She was 4 years younger than Warren, louder where he was quiet, and she had a way of filling rooms that I'd always found slightly exhausting. We were polite to each other. That was the most accurate description. Polite. So when she called me on a Wednesday afternoon in April, I almost didn't pick up. "Lynette," she said when I answered, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you say anything." I sat down on the edge of my couch. "Okay," I said. "I don't know all of it," she started. "And I want you to know I'm not doing this to cause problems. I think you deserve to know what's been happening." She paused. I waited. "Mom has been borrowing money from Warren," she said. "A lot of it. For a long time." My mother-in-law's name is Greta. She was 61 years old, retired early from a hospital administration job, and she had always been a particular kind of woman. The kind who knew exactly how a room should be arranged and wasn't shy about saying so. She had opinions about my cooking, my career, the curtains in our front room. I had spent 6 years finding diplomatic ways around her. I'd thought of her as an intrusion, not a threat. I was wrong. According to Jolene, and she spoke carefully, qualifying everything, making clear what she knew versus what she suspected. Their mother had been going through financial trouble for several years. A poor investment. A loan she'd co-signed for a friend that went badly. Expenses that had quietly outpaced her pension. And rather than deal with it openly, she had gone to Warren, repeatedly, in private. "How much?" I asked. Jolene hesitated. "She thinks I don't know the number," she said. "But I found a statement. It's over $90,000. The room went quiet. Not the room, me. I went quiet inside. $90,000 in Canadian dollars. The kind of money that represents years of careful saving, the down payment we'd been building on a larger home, the buffer I thought we had for starting a family. I knew our savings. I tracked our finances. I had spreadsheets. And then I realized. I tracked the accounts I knew about. "He has another account," I said. It wasn't a question. Something locked into place. "I think so," Jolene said. "I don't know for certain, but I think she's been pressuring him to keep it from you, and I think, Lynette, I think she's the one who told him to file for separation." I couldn't speak for a moment. "Why would she do that?" I finally asked. Jolene was quiet then. "Because, if you divorce, you're not entitled to the full picture of the joint finances. She's been scared you'd find out. Scared of what would happen." I thought about the past 6 months. The withdrawal, the silence, the nothings every time. I asked what was wrong. I thought about couples counseling and Warren stopping after 2 sessions. I thought about the folder on the kitchen table and the way he looked slightly to the left of my face when he said he was sorry. He hadn't wanted to leave me. He had been managed into it. By his mother. I didn't act right away. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. I called Ms. Whitfield the next morning. I told her what Jolene had told me. She was calm, methodical, and said that if there was evidence of concealed assets, that changed the nature of the proceedings significantly. She filed a request for full financial disclosure. Warren's lawyer pushed back. Ms. Whitfield pushed harder. It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of forms and requests and legal language I had to have explained to me multiple times. 6 weeks during which Warren and I barely spoke, during which I would see him occasionally when he came to pick up his things, and he would look at me with an expression I couldn't read. Somewhere between regret and paralysis, like a man who had been told to walk a road and couldn't explain why he was walking it. The day of the mediation meeting arrived in June, It was held in a meeting room on the 14th floor of an office building on 8th Avenue. Ms. Whitfield sat beside me. Warren and his lawyer sat across from us. There was a mediator at the head of the table, a quiet man in his 50s who had the practiced neutrality of someone paid specifically to have no feelings. Warren looked exhausted. Genuinely exhausted, not performatively. There were circles under his eyes, and he was holding a coffee cup like it was the only solid thing available. I looked at him and, despite everything, felt something ache. We had barely started when the door opened. Everyone turned. The mediator frowned. His assistant leaned in from the hallway with an expression that suggested she wasn't sure how to handle what was happening. And then Greta walked in. She was wearing a gray blazer and the particular expression of someone who has decided that controlled confidence is the appropriate armor for this situation. She looked at the room. She looked at the mediator. She looked at Warren's lawyer. She did not look at me. "I have something to say," she announced. "Ma'am," the mediator began. "This is a closed mediation session. I'm his mother," she said. "I have information that's relevant to these proceedings." Warren had gone pale. "Mom," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "Someone has to be," she said. She sat down at the end of the table without being invited. Her lawyer, I didn't know she'd hired one, but of course she had, came in behind her and sat beside her. Ms. Whitfield looked at me. I looked at her. She gave the smallest possible nod that communicated, "Let this play out." What happened next took approximately 40 minutes and dismantled the version of events I had been living inside for the past 6 months. It came out in pieces: financial documents, bank statements, transfer records from an account in Warren's name that I had not known existed, correspondence, written correspondence, because Greta did things the old way, between her and Warren that his lawyer had apparently not been aware of. The picture that assembled itself was this. 2 years ago, Greta had come to Warren in what she described as a temporary crisis. She'd needed money urgently. She'd asked him not to tell me because she was embarrassed. Warren had agreed, once, then she'd come back. And again, each time with a new urgency, each time with the same request for discretion. By the time the amount had reached the number Jolene had mentioned, Warren had been carrying it for over a year. He'd been covering the transfers with income from a contract project he hadn't mentioned to me. He'd been lying, not with his words exactly, but with his silence. Every day, when the transfers were no longer sustainable, Greta had told him that the only way to protect himself and her from the consequences was to separate from me before a full financial picture became a legal requirement. I advised him, she said, using that word carefully, that separating was a cleaner solution. The mediator asked her to define what she meant by advised. "I told him," she said, without flinching, "that you," and here she finally looked at me, "would not understand." The room was so quiet I could hear the air system in the building. I looked at her. I had spent 6 years being polite to this woman. 6 years of finding diplomatic angles. 6 years of holding my tongue at dinners and nodding through opinions about my curtains. "I would not understand," I repeated. "You're very focused on finances," she said. It was not a compliment. Ms. Whitfield placed a hand briefly on my arm. Not to stop me from speaking. Just to remind me she was there. Warren's lawyer looked deeply uncomfortable. He clearly had not known about the correspondence. He leaned over to Warren and said something quiet, and Warren shook his head, and the expression on Warren's face in that moment. I've thought about it many times since. It was the face of a man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and had just been told he could set it down, but that everyone would see what it was first. "Warren?" I said. He looked at me. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice was steady. "I don't know how." He closed his eyes. "Because I thought I could fix it," he said. "And then I couldn't. And by the time I couldn't, I'd been lying for so long that I didn't know how to start telling the truth. So your solution was to divorce me instead." "It wasn't my solution," he said. "I know that's not. I know that doesn't make it better." "It doesn't," I agreed. Greta made a sound, a small, impatient sound, like someone who has been waiting for a conversation to end and can't understand why it's still going. I turned to look at her. You convinced your son to end his marriage, I said. To protect yourself. I was protecting the family, she said. I was the family, I said. She didn't answer. The mediator called a brief recess at that point, which I think was his way of acknowledging that the session had become something other than what it was designed to be. During the break, Ms. Whitfield spoke to Warren's lawyer in the hallway. I stood by the window and looked down at the street, 14 floors below, and watched people walk along the sidewalk and thought about how completely ordinary everything looked from a distance. Jolene had come. I hadn't known she would. She appeared at my elbow during the recess, coming from the waiting area where she'd apparently been sitting for the past hour. Are you okay? She asked. I genuinely don't know, I said. She nodded. That's honest. When we reconvened, Warren's lawyer indicated that, given the disclosure of the financial correspondence, his client wished to suspend the mediation pending review of all relevant documents. The mediator noted this in the record. Greta's lawyer said something about the nature of informal family financial arrangements that Ms. Whitfield countered with 2 sentences that I didn't fully follow, but that clearly landed, because Greta's lawyer stopped talking. The meeting ended without a resolution. Warren and I stood in the hallway outside the elevator. His mother had left quickly, her lawyer guiding her toward the stairs with the urgency of someone trying to remove a person from a situation before they say anything further. Jolene had given me a brief hug and told me to call her, which I said I would and meant. Warren and I were alone. I'm sorry, he said. He said it like the words had been waiting a long time. I know, I said. That's not enough. No, I agreed. It isn't. He looked out the window at the end of the hallway. The afternoon light was coming in at a low angle, and it made everything look slightly golden and very sad. I've been in contact with a therapist, he said. For a few weeks. I should have done it months ago. Yes, I said. You should have. I don't expect anything, he said. I want you to know that. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know the truth, all of it. I thought about the 9 years. The housewarming in Kensington. Biscuit. The half-renovated basement. The names we'd picked out. I'm angry, I told him. You have every right to be. I'm going to be angry for a long time. I know. And I need you to understand something, I said. This. All of it. The hiding. The silence. The way you let me spend months thinking I'd done something wrong. That caused real damage. That's not something a sorry fixes. He nodded. He didn't try to argue with it or minimize it or explain his way around it. He just nodded, and something in that, the not arguing, the simply accepting, shifted something very slightly in the air between us. I didn't take him back that afternoon. I want to be clear about that. We didn't hug in the hallway and agree that love conquers all. That's not what happened. I went home, and he went to the apartment he'd been renting in Inglewood, and I sat on the couch with Biscuit and cried for about an hour in a way that felt necessary and overdue. But I didn't sign the separation papers. What followed was the hardest 4 months of my life, and also, in a strange way, the most clarifying. Ms. Whitfield continued the financial disclosure process. The full picture that emerged was complicated. The transfers, the hidden account, the pressure Greta had applied over nearly 2 years. It was, Ms. Whitfield noted, potentially grounds for a separate legal matter involving misrepresentation within a marriage, if I chose to pursue it. I was advised to speak to a forensic accountant. I did. His name was Mr. Pellerin, and he had the energy of a man who finds financial irregularities genuinely interesting, which I found oddly comforting. Greta, for her part, retained a lawyer and became very quiet. The version of her that had walked into that mediation room with a gray blazer and absolute confidence did not appear again. According to Jolene, who had become something I hadn't expected, which was a genuine support. Their mother had been required to provide her own financial documentation and was not handling the process well. Warren was in therapy twice a week. He'd also begun, at Ms. Whitfield's suggestion and with full transparency, working with a financial advisor to document everything. Every transfer, every correspondence, see every decision point. He provided all of it without being asked twice. I started therapy too. My therapist's name was Dr. Bensler, and she had a small office near Kensington, close to where Warren and I had met, which I noticed but she didn't mention. She was direct in a way I appreciated. She didn't tell me what to feel. She helped me figure out what I actually felt, which turned out to be considerably more complicated than either pure anger or pure grief. I felt betrayed. That was real. He had kept something enormous from me, and the weight of that secret had changed him into someone I didn't recognize, and I had spent months blaming myself for a distance that had nothing to do with me. I also, underneath all of that, still loved him. That was real too. I didn't want it to be true, because it felt inconvenient and perhaps foolish, but Dr. Bensler was quite firm that feelings didn't need to be convenient to be valid. "What do you want?" she asked me. "Not what makes sense. Not what you think you should want. What do you actually want?" I thought about it for a long time before I answered. I wanted honesty. I wanted a marriage where secrets couldn't take root because there was no reason for them to. I wanted the person I had thought Warren was. And I wanted to find out if that person was still there underneath what the last 2 years had done to him. Warren and I started meeting for coffee. Not as a couple, just as two people who needed to figure out if there was still something worth returning to. It was awkward at first in a way that felt absurd given how long we'd known each other. We talked about small things. Biscuit, work, what he'd been reading. Then gradually about bigger things. He told me about the first time his mother had asked him for money. The way he'd said yes without thinking because she seemed genuinely frightened, and how by the time he understood the pattern he was already too far into it to see a way out that didn't hurt everyone. "I should have told you," he said, one afternoon at a cafe on 17th Avenue. "The first time, I should have said, she needs help, and I want to help her, but I can't do it secretly. I should have brought you into it. Why didn't you?" He wrapped both hands around his mug. "Because I thought you'd say no." "Maybe I would have," I said honestly. "At least some of it. But it would have been our decision." "I know," he said. "That's the part I keep coming back to. I made it mine. I don't know when I decided that was okay, but I did." "And your mother encouraged that?" "Yes," he said. "She's very good at making her problems feel like they're yours to solve." I knew that already. I'd felt it at dinners for years, that particular gravitational pull she had. I just hadn't known it extended this far. As for Greta, the legal situation resolved itself slowly, and ultimately, without going to court. A repayment arrangement was negotiated through the lawyers. It wasn't the full amount, but it was structured and documented and enforceable. She did not apologize to me directly. I did not expect her to. What I did require, and this was not negotiable, not a conversation, not up for discussion, was that any future contact between Warren's mother and our finances would go through me, not around me, not without my knowledge. If she needed help, if anything came up, it would be a conversation that included me, or it would not happen. Warren agreed without hesitation. Jolene, when I told her, said, "Good. Finally, I'm telling this now from the other side of it." 14 months later, back in our house in the suburb outside Calgary, with Biscuit sleep on the couch beside me and the basement finally finished. We're still married. That surprises some people when I tell them. A few friends, when I've explained pieces of it, have said they wouldn't have stayed. I understand that. I've thought about it myself. In the honest hours late at night, when I'm not performing anything for anyone. There were moments when I was certain I wouldn't. When the anger was too large, and the trust felt like a thing that could never be rebuilt from what it had been reduced to. But trust isn't rebuilt in a moment. It's rebuilt in small things, repeated. In Warren answering my questions fully and without defensiveness. In the financial transparency he maintains now, not because I demanded it, but because he understands why it matters. In the way he told his mother, in a conversation I was present for, that her influence on our marriage was finished. That conversation was not easy to watch, she cried. She accused him of choosing me over his family, which is, I'll say it directly, exactly what he did. And it was the right thing to do. He held the line. I watched him do it and felt something I hadn't expected, which was respect. We are not the same people we were before. The marriage we have now is not the one we had at the beginning, built on the comfortable assumption that honesty was just the default. This one is more deliberate. We chose it. We had to. I think about that mediation room sometimes. The 14th floor. The afternoon light coming through the window. The way Greta walked in like she owned the room and left 20 minutes later, with her lawyer steering her toward the stairs. I think about standing in that hallway with Warren afterward and saying, plainly, I'm angry. Not performing it, not weaponizing it, just saying the true thing. That was the beginning of something. It wasn't the apology that saved us. It wasn't the legal process, though that mattered. It was the moment when there was finally nothing left to hide. When every document was on the table and every lie had been named, and we had to look at each other in the middle of all of it and decide what we were going to do. Some marriages don't survive that. I understand why. The damage is real, and wanting to start over somewhere clean is not a failure of love. But we decided to stay in the mess and work on it. And working on it has been exactly as hard as it sounds, and occasionally, in the small moments, exactly as good as I'd hoped. The basement has new flooring. Light gray, which I picked and Warren didn't argue about. Biscuit has claimed most of the new couch. We've started talking again about Nova Scotia, and I think this year we might actually go. The future feels like ours again. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but ours chosen deliberately, with nothing hidden. That turns out to be more than enough.